Good afternoon, Iona family, guests. This afternoon, hi, my name is Dr. Melissa Aponte, and I serve currently as a Director of Student Development, and super excited to be hosting our Black History Month keynote event here at Iona College. So this afternoon, we have the Kevin Powell joining us. And Kevin, I'm just going to give a somewhat brief introduction so everyone kind of knows a little bit about you, but this is all for you to share your story with us and talk with us this afternoon. So Powell is an American writer, civil and human rights activist, poet, journalist, public speaker, filmmaker, and entrepreneur. He is a native of Jersey City, raised by a single mother in extreme poverty, but managed to study at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. And thanks to New Jersey's Educational Opportunity Fund, he was able to do so. Kevin has gone on to be the author of more than a dozen books, including The Education of Kevin Powell, A Boy's Journey into Manhood, which is a critically acclaimed and brutally honest memoir about his life, including his youth. As a pop culture curator, Powell produced the first exhibit on the history of hip hop in America at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, which toured America and overseas. As a humanitarian, Powell's work includes local, national, and international initiatives and violence against women and girls. And he did appear on the Oprah Winfrey Show, highlighting domestic violence. He's done extensive philanthropic relief work, ranging from Hurricane Katrina to earthquakes in Haiti and Japan to Superstorm Sandy that happened here in New York. Prior speaking engagements include stops at Microsoft headquarters, Stanford, and the U.S. Department of Justice, and the 50th anniversary celebration of the March on Washington, among many others. We are so honored and excited to have you with us this afternoon, Kevin, and please, everyone, join me in giving a warm welcome to Kevin Powell.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back with Iona College School. I have a lot of love for it. Thank you, Dr. Aponte. Thank you. And I want to shout out, obviously, Iona College, all of you here today. It's, steep times that we're in because it's, I've literally spent the past 25 years on the road doing speeches around the country. And I've been blessed to visit all 50 states in our country, but it's obviously because of COVID. Here we are. And so it's been a lot of Zoom talks nonstop. And I want this to be interactive as quickly as possible because I don't think it's right or fair for speakers, whether they're in person or on Zoom like this, to just talk and not hear the voices of the folks in the community and the audience as well. Is that cool? Can you all just wave your hands and let me know you're good with that? Okay. First and foremost, I don't want to take for granted that people know exactly where Black History Month came from, since this is a Black History Month program. Two things, if you follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn, which is where I've lived for almost 30 years, Brooklyn, New York, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn, you'll see me posting every single day something about music and Black history, but also something about Black history, some Black History Month fact. I'm actually going to continue doing that right during Women's History Month in March, because I think that is very, very important. And we need to use social media, I believe, not just to speculate about why did Kim and Kanye get divorced or why are they getting divorced, but also, to share information with each other. Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Carter G. Woodson created what was known as Negro History Week in February of 1926. He was one of the first African-Americans to get a PhD in this country, one of the early PhDs out of the Black community. And he was a scholar, he wrote many books. His most famous book was The Miseducation of the Negro. And we know that about 20 years ago, a singer named Lauryn Hill made an album called The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which was actually inspired by the album, the title of Dr. Woodson's book. He picked February of 1926 because two people central to Black history and American history, both, because you can't really separate the two, were born in February. One was Abraham Lincoln. And when I was growing up, and so any of us over 30 or 40 know what I'm talking about, we used to celebrate Washington's birthday, Lincoln's birthday separately. And at some point, maybe y'all remember when, I don't remember when it happened, all of a sudden it was just President's Day, But Abraham Lincoln was born in February because he was the president of the United States during the Civil War, pushed through the Emancipation Proclamation, and has been credited with ending the institution of slavery and saving our union. Then the second person born in February was an African-American who was born into slavery named Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, one of our great leaders. And it's interesting enough, Frederick Douglass and Lincoln were contemporaries, they were peers. Frederick Douglass actually ended up being the most photographed American of the 1800s of the 19th century. Frederick Douglass quietly learned how to read when he was a child while still a slave on a plantation in Maryland. And we know, if we know American history, and we should, that if it was found out by an overseer or a slave master, slave owner, that a slave or slave knew how to read and write, even the Bible, they could be brutalized, even killed for simply wanting to read or knowing how to read the Bible. So he did it. He was able to escape from slavery, and he ended up becoming a great abolitionist. And we know that Black folks and white folks together created this thing called the abolitionist movement, and then helped to push people like Lincoln into the decision to fight against slavery. And so that's why it was Negro History Week. And by the time we got to the 1970s, 1976 specifically, because of the great civil rights movement of the 1960s and 1950s and 1960s, it became Black History Month. So that's where it came from. But I'm going to say it again: Black history is not just for Black people. It's not just about Black people, because Black history, women's history, Latinx history, Asian history, Native American history, LGBTQ plus communities, disabled communities, all these communities are all American history as well. The reason why you see these weeks, these months that are celebrated throughout the year is because, unfortunately, so many of us, no matter what our identity or identities, have not only not been taught about ourselves and our full history. What is it to be Jewish, to be Italian, to be Irish, to be Polish, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Filipino, Chinese, African American, West Indian, all these different identities. But many of us, unfortunately, have not even learned about people different than us. And that's why Black History Month exists. That's why Women's History Month exists. Just like, for example, as I was growing up, I was an A student in Jersey City. My mother only had an 8th grade education, as was said in the introduction by Dr. Ponte, but she pushed me from the time I was 3 or 4 years old. You're going to go to college. You're going to go to college. She understood the importance of learning, and that I could have a better life than hers if I just took school seriously. But K through 12, all I learned was that Black people were slaves. That was a paragraph or two. That Rosa Parks refused to give her seat on the bus, and that Dr. King had a dream. That was 13 years of school, K through 12. I was an A student the whole way. What did I learn about women's history? Nothing. Betsy Ross sewed a flag. Rosa Parks refused to give her seat. And some woman named Helen Keller, who was blind and deaf, and never really gave us a sense of how brilliant she was as a human being. What did I learn about Italians, Jewish folks, Irish folks, Puerto Rican folks? You just go down the list. Nothing at all. Why do I bring that up? When we look at the state of our world right now, the topic that I'm on is When We Free the World, which is the title of my 14th book, my latest book. Is really, and the book purposely is a recreation of a famous photo by Richard Avedon, a gentleman who came from the Bronx, New York, actually went to school with James Baldwin, one of our great writers. Baldwin, African American, Richard Avedon, Jewish brother, friends, understanding the importance of their heritage, their cultures, but also supporting each other. Richard Avedon shot this photo of Black and white young people in the 1960s who were civil rights workers. I decided to remix that image for my book cover in the 21st century and have young people who are Black and white, but also Latinx and Native American, Jewish, Muslim, all different types of backgrounds. And so, that's the world that I want to see. That's the America that exists for us. But unfortunately, when we talk about Black history in 2021, I still have people who ask me, why do we have to celebrate Black History Month? Why do we have to have Women's History Month? Why do we have to have Pride? Why do we have to have Latinx Heritage Month, Hispanic Heritage Month? The list goes on. And it's again because most of us have been so grossly miseducated or undereducated about who we are and about others. If you don't think so, think about what just happened on January 6th. Literally, as we're sitting here now, our government, the US Senate, is having hearings about the insurrection, the riot, the rebellion, that ugly violence that happened on January 6th. And most of the folks out there were people who had no problem waving Confederate flags, swastikas, using very hateful language towards people that were different than them. And it's not about liberal or conservative. This is not about Democrat or Republican. But ultimately, what I look at when I see things like January 6th is like, what kind of human being, what kind of American do you want to be? Do you want to be a bridge builder who brings people together? Or do you want to be a bridge destroyer who hates people because of the color of their skin or their gender or gender identity, their class background, their ability or disability, their age, where they live, where they're from, what language or languages they can and cannot speak? That's why Black History Month is important. January 6th was an awful day, but unlike a lot of people who said, how could this happen? When I watched it, I thought about American history. Unfortunately, that's not unusual. You know, we've seen in Black communities like Tulsa, Oklahoma, 100 years ago in 1921, a thriving Black community where you had hundreds of Black businesses of all kinds destroyed by the same kind of white supremacist hatred and miseducation, gross miseducation that we witnessed on January 6th in the nation's capital. In the early 1900s, my great-grandfather on my mother's side was killed simply because he was a Black person post-slavery who owned 400 acres of land. And literally, he was also a cook, a chef for the community. So he made food for white folks and Black folks in the community, but they also coveted his land. He refused to sell his land, and he eventually was killed for his land. This is why we have to have these conversations. Malcolm X said it best many years ago, you know, when he was alive, history is a people's memory. History is a people's memory. And without it, we're demoted to the lower animals. What else is happening? COVID. Just by a show of hands, folks that I can see right now, how many of y'all, you know, could not even imagine something like this a year ago? How many of y'all, like me, have lost people to COVID? How many of y'all have been terrified by what we've had to deal with for almost a year now? This thing doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're Black, if you're white, if you're Latinx, if you're Asian, Native American, doesn't care if you're straight or queer, however you identify yourself, non-gender conforming, no binary whatsoever, doesn't care if you're wealthy or poor. This thing does not discriminate, you know? And what saddens me as we've been dealing with COVID, and I've definitely been out there as an activist and organizer, everything from documenting it, also as a journalist in publications like the New York Times and Ms. Magazine, but and also working with a photographer, we put together an exhibit around it, and also offering relief work, is that a lot of us, you know, in spite of what COVID has done to our country and this planet over the last year, we still see a lot of the ugly divides. Part of the challenge for us, and I'm saying this to all of us out there, you know, we cannot continue to act as if it's okay to perpetuate fear, violence, division, and hatred. You know, I love the fact that I'm a Black person, I'm an African-American person, not because I feel superior to anyone else. I don't believe in that. You know, I don't feel like I'm supreme to anyone else, but I honor and love who I am, but I also love all people, no matter who they are. It's not an either or, it's both. But what I realized that in order for me to love all people, I have to know who I am. And so I had to, when I got to Rutgers University, learn Black history, African-American history, which means I also learned Afro-Caribbean history, West Indian history. I learned African history. I learned Afro-Latinx history. I had to learn all of it. I mean, here I am, someone who grew up in Jersey City. Many of my friends happen to be Puerto Rican and Dominican. I didn't know anything about Puerto Rican Dominican history either. Pero yo hablo español because my friends, mi amigos, I learned Spanish from my friends. And I knew the basics of the culture, the music, salsa, merengue, you know, novelas, you know what I'm saying? But who are Puerto Ricans? Who are Dominicans? Who are Mexicans? You know, what is this culture that I'm so deeply fascinated by that I want to learn the language? You know, and it wasn't until I got to college as I was reading, you know, Black writers like Nikki Giovanni and Langston Hughes or whoever it may have been. I was like, oh, I need to know who Perry Thomas is and Pablo Neruda as well. You know, I need to know who Jane Cortez is and who's Sonia Sanchez. Who are these writers? Who are the Nuyorican poets? And so what I'm getting at is that we will continue to have fear, division, violence, and hatred if we are not students for the rest of our lives. I don't care if you're 18 or 80, we got to be curious about what's happening in the world. We got to be curious about our own lives, and we got to be curious about ways that we can get involved and make the world a better place. I'm going to end it here, and then I want to open it up But I'm going to just say this. In spite of Mr. Biden, Joe Biden, winning the election and Kamala Harris being the first woman of color vice president of the United States, you know, Jamaican father, mother from India, the country of India, which is an incredible accomplishment, absolutely part of history. It hurts my heart that in 2021, as I was getting ready for this program today, an alert popped up that the Supreme Court is about to hear a case around voting rights, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I'm going to say it again. My mother has an 8th grade education. My family's from South Carolina. There's been an incredible effort to deny people basic human rights and citizenship rights in our country. January 6th was just an aberration for some people, but it's something that some of us have known for a very long time and have felt in different ways. Denying people the right to vote, suppressing votes, you know, saying people stole the votes. I mean, the thing that was so ironic for me, when I went to college a long time ago, myself and other students actually went down to the South, to places like Georgia and Alabama, to re-register people to vote because they were being knocked off the rolls by people who were, in fact, white supremacists. And so to turn around all these years later and hear people who are, in fact, white supremacists saying the election was stolen, it was a fraud, I can't tell you the irony of hearing that kind of stuff. But when people are operating with fear and hatred and division and violence in their hearts, that's what happens. And so, you know, we've got a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. And Dr. King asked a question at the end of his life that I think is very important. He asked the question, where do we go from here? And the subtitle of that question, where do we go from here, which is also a book, Chaos or Community? Chaos or community? I want community. I look at this beautiful diversity that I see on the screen here, you know, I'm looking at the names of people, you know, Julissa Ramos and Jessica Fernandez and Casey Dele Carpini. You know, I'm like, this is the world that we live in, you know, where no matter who you are, we're all equals, we're all important, we all matter. So I want to say a few things and leave you all with, so we can open up the floor to conversation and questions and dialogue. One, if you don't remember anything else that I said today, please write this down. Hashtag read, study, travel. Hashtag read, study, travel. Hashtag read, study, travel. I know I'm speaking to college environment, but I'm going to say this again. I have been to all 50 states in this country. I've been to 5 of the 7 continents. I still need to get to Antarctica. I'm definitely going to do it, no matter how cold it is, and Australia, you know. And what reading has done for me, number one, reading books like Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, which is a very important text about the history of our country. Howard Zinn was a young white brother, a young Jewish brother who participated in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And as he was working with the Black folks and white folks who were engineering this movement to change the whole country, not just for Black people, but for all people, he realized he didn't know a lot about Black Americans. And that led to him saying eventually in the introduction to A People's History of the United States, I want to write a book from the perspective of the people whose voices we often don't hear. Black folks, brown folks, yellow folks, red folks, working class or poor white folks, poor people of all backgrounds, women of all backgrounds. Where's the LGBTQ plus community at? Where's the disabled community at? Where are young people at in the history books that we're being given as we learn? So we got to read, we got to know history. I'm right now rewatching for the first time in years, Eyes on the Prize, which is the definitive documentary series on the history of the civil rights movement. It's for free on YouTube right now. I strongly recommend we watch it, you know, because I think it's important for us to know where we came from. We will think that what has happened over the last few years is something new, but if we don't know history, as Malcolm X said, you know, we're demoted to the lower animals, or you know, we're doomed to repeat it over and over again. So read, study, travel. Reading means books. It means newspapers. It means magazines. It means websites that are informative. I mean, on my iPhone, I have so many apps. I'm a huge sports fan. I'm a huge pop culture fan. I'm a huge music fan. I got those apps. But I also got Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! I also have NPR. I also have the New York Times. I also have Degrio. I also have BET.com. Because I'm like, I have to be informed of what's going on. I have to become because we can't free ourselves, in my opinion, if we don't know how to become critical thinkers. The real point of education is to be a critical thinker, not just repeat what's given to you back to your teacher, professor, and hope to get a good grade. You know why I was an A student, K through 12? I memorized stuff really well. I really memorized a lot of stuff really well. It wasn't until I got to college, to Rutgers University, that I realized I was just really, really exceptional at memorizing stuff. I wasn't really truly thinking for myself. Critical thinking is what education is about. Hashtag read, study, travel. Travel, obviously with COVID, we can't travel physically the way we may want to. But when I say travel, I also mean if you read things, you listen to things, podcasts, audiobooks, if you study on a serious basis, not just to get a good grade, not just for a career, because if you want a career, you don't actually have to go to college to get a career. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs never finished college. What degree does Beyonce have? What degree does Maya Angelou have? I go down a list of people. But what they all have in common is they made a commitment to being excellent at what they do. And I'm saying we need to become excellent as Americans, as people in this country, at actually knowing who we are and knowing about other people. We need to become experts, excellent at love and peace and nonviolence and being bridge builders. Y'all with me out there? Hashtag read, study, travel. So travel also means having an imagination, being intellectually curious, knowing who you are. Just don't tell me you're Black or white. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Don't just say I'm Latinx or Asian or Native American. Well, what does that mean? Where did you come from? How did your people get here? Who are you? What did your community contribute to this thing called civilization on a world level, not just in America? And what do they contribute to America? As an African American, I can say, you know what? Yes, my community created everything from juice presser to the traffic light, to the gas mask. We had some sort of hand in many tons of inventions. George Washington Carver alone from Tuskegee University created over 100 inventions by himself. Take away African Americans, Black folks, there's no blues, spirituals, rock and roll, soul, hip hop, period. There's a long list of things I can talk about. I grew up only learning the stereotypes. The other day I was doing a corporate talk where an Italian American brother who's the CEO of the company, we were talking. I said, think about this. One of the greatest films ever is The Godfather, which is an American classic without question. It's a genius piece of filmmaking. But since The Godfather 1 and 2 have come out, guess what, y'all? There's been over 7,000 movies and TV shows that have depicted Italian Americans as members of the mafia. That's called a stereotype. And I'm saying, I'm looking at a CEO of a company who's Italian American. His name needs to be known as much as Don Corleone's name. That's what I'm talking about. And so when we talk about where we need to go, we got to be the change that we want to see. This is the work we have to do. It can't stop with an election victory. It can't be one step forward and then 5 steps backwards, which is what I've seen pretty much my entire adult life since I went to college as an 18-year-old. I'm asking you all in the spirit of people like Dr. King, Ella Baker, Fannie Hamer, Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, Gloria Steinem, V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, and many other people, let's make a commitment for the rest of our lives to contribute something to bringing people together, to learning how to listen to each other, learning how and having the courage to have uncomfortable conversations with each other. We can't continue to say, well, I have Black friends, or I have Latinx friends, I have Asian friends, I have women friends, I have queer friends, I have disabled friends. No, because you know what that does when you say things like that? When we say things like that, we're still centering ourselves and our privilege. What we need to do is to listen to people who are different than us as our equals, as our equals, as our equals. And what we need to do is learn how to love. Love. El amor, love. What's wrong with love? Love is a beautiful thing. And if love really was so prevalent in the world, we wouldn't have to have these kind of conversations. So Dr. Ponte and Iona College, thank you for this time. I'm looking forward to the dialogue. Con mucho gusto. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. You actually ended on something that reminded me of our Latinx Heritage Month keynote. Paola Mendoza spoke about love, and no matter what, you know, in the effort of fighting for causes and constantly, like, you know, when you're trying to overcome inequity, to do it with a place of love, and that's a common theme, is what the power of love. And so I appreciate you just naturally kind of tied that theme. So I just had to kind of go back to that previous keynote we had with Paola.
Thank you. Can I say one
Well,
thing?
yeah,
I see
absolutely.
you all in chat. This is beautiful because this is what community looks like. We're sharing resources with each other, which is so powerful. So thank y'all for doing that, because again, yes, I'm the speaker, but I'm not one of those speakers like I have all the answers. I think I know everything. Nope. We're in this together. We got to figure this thing out together as human beings. Do you all agree with that? We're in this together, y'all. We are.
So now I am just going to follow your lead. So if anyone has questions, comments, you can feel free to type it in the chat and then I can call it out, or you can unmute yourself politely and ask your question. It's pretty open floor right now for all of you with Kevin here.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. I'm just scrolling through to see if anyone's got a hand raised.
So I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
I'm so sorry. You spoke first. You can go first.
Thank you very much. My question is, to those who aren't as open to love, I say some of us are. How can we get that across? To some people who are more, I guess, a little closed-minded.
We still have to be what we want to see. I mean, Gandhi said it best, the great Indian leader. We have to be the change we want to see. We have to model what we want to see. I mean, I can sit here and tell you all that I cannot deal with hatred. I cannot deal with violence and all these different things that we see, all the isms and phobias out there. But if I don't model the opposite of it, if I don't present on a consistent basis an alternative, then I'm part of the problem. You feel what I'm saying? So even when people are resistant to it, you still got to do it. I still tell people I love you no matter what, even if I got to keep safe distance from people who are absolutely toxic and not healthy for me. Because I'm not going to lie to you. Some folks are mad toxic. Let's keep it 1,000 here. Let's keep it a buck here. You know what I'm saying? But, what I've learned in the spirit of Dr. King and other folks is that, love really is the answer, but it's not just love by itself. It also means you have to do deeds. You have to actually show. Like, I can't just say that I'm anti-sexism as we approach Women's History Month. I have a responsibility as a heterosexual male, as a cisgendered male. Kevin, you need to go back and learn the history of women of all different backgrounds. You have homework to do. You have to learn how to become a listener to women and girls. Action step. Kevin, you actually need to become an ally to women and girls. Action step. Kevin, you can't just be around women and folks who identify as women and girls. You also have to become an ally. You have to become someone who's actually a disruptor of patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia among cisgendered males who think that that's the way to go because they're not practicing love, they're practicing hate. You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
So, action steps. Yeah.
All right. I think there was someone, I'm sorry, I heard your voice. Someone else was going to ask a question, and then I have Jack Morris lined up next. But
yeah, I'll just ask. So, no, Kevin, I just want to ask, you spoke a little bit about, it was really brief, but you spoke about like the ballots being like tampered with and stuff. I was just wondering, can you speak a little bit more into that? And maybe if you have a resource or something that I can check out or anything like that.
I mean, where do I start? Resource, I wrote a cover story for the Washington Post magazine last May about Stacey Abrams, the great leader from Georgia. Please look it up. It lays out very clearly what happened to her as she was running for governor of Georgia in 2018. There was voter suppression, there was voter theft, period. And poetic justice came in 2020 when Stacey Abrams and LaTosha Brown and other Black women, other powerful Black women leaders in Georgia and around the country organized in a way that we could not have ever imagined and delivered the White House for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And so That there's no more clearer evidence than that. And that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for consistent voter suppression in places like that. But what Stacey Abrams did, along with other folks, and keep in mind, it wasn't just Stacey Abrams, and she'll be the first one to tell you that because she's very humble. It was a diverse coalition of people who look just like you all on this Zoom call in the state of Georgia, because everybody named Mama is moving to Atlanta or has moved to the Atlanta area. And that new blood led to people saying, we're going to create things like Fair Fight, which is a resource for you. Look that up, Fair Fight. You know, in fact, in the article, you'll see 3 organizations that Stacey Abrams and her team created. They lay out very clearly examples of voter suppression, voter theft, not just in Georgia, around the country, but just as important, here's the work that we are doing to fight that, to empower voters, you know? And it's even simple things, Jessica, like, you know, I come from poverty. And just so y'all, I want you to remember this, poverty is a form of violence because it denies human beings their full humanity. But one of the things that a lot of poor people don't have access to is quality Wi-Fi, basic things like that to get information, you know what I mean? Particularly in rural areas or poor inner city areas, you know what I'm saying? Many folks only have their cell phones. They don't even have laptops, don't have computers, things we take for granted. And so when I think about voter suppression, it's been a way to deal to come after those folks in particular. I don't think it's a coincidence. Most of the voter suppression has been against Black, Latinx people, Asian folks, Native American folks, women of all backgrounds, the LGBTQ plus community, folks who may be first or generation immigrants. Think about the groups that I'm talking about, and poor people of all backgrounds. Groups that have been marginalized historically have been targeted over and over again around voter suppression all around the country. You know what I mean? So our responsibility is to become very well aware of it. And also, what are the efforts that are out there that we can actually replicate in New York State and wherever we live to fight against this, just like Georgia gave us a model. This is how you do it. We just need to replicate it. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack Morris, go for it.
Hey, hi, everybody. So this isn't really a question, but we just talked about trying to spread positivity and love. So I figured I'd take a shot at that real quick. So my freshman year of college, which, wow, to think that was essentially 4 years ago now, you came and spoke, and I came up to you after your presentation and you asked me if I was a leader. And as an 18-year-old, I said to you, I'm going to try to be. And you know, now I'm a senior, getting ready to start graduate school, and that has stuck with me my entire college career, that small interaction. So I just wanted to say, like, thank you so much. And I'm so happy that I get to come to another one of your presentations in my last year of undergrad. That's so poetic to me. It just makes me so happy that I get to be here for this. So thank you so much for that.
Wow. Jack, you're about to make me cry. You know, Brother Jack, I love all of you. You know, I mean that. Nothing changes in our world, in our country, without young people. You know, that's not to discount older people. We're all important. We're all valuable. But the one thing that I've been thinking about, Jack, is I've been rewatching Eyes on the Prize, is how young these people were. You know, Black and white folks of different backgrounds. How Dr. King was only 26 when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. You know, and so the reason why I say that to people when they're 18 years old, Jack, is because it was said to me. You know, and it's a question that I think that a lot of times we're not asked. I really believe that all of you are geniuses. I really believe that all of you are leaders. You know, you don't have to do what I do, speak, and you don't have to do what I do, but do something. It's like what Bobby Kennedy, one of our great leaders of the 60s, said, you know, just be a ripple, a tiny ripple of hope, a tiny ripple of hope. That's all we need, because if all those ripples are happening together, then amazing things can happen for our country and for our world. You know, you know, and that's why I asked Jack, because it's like, you know, I want to live in a world where everyone is treated equally, where everyone has an opportunity to have an opportunity, where, you know, race or gender identity or no gender identity or class or age, 18 or 22, doesn't determine what you can and cannot do. Yeah. Let's add another resource now that I'm thinking about it. Please, on YouTube, is Bobby Kennedy's speech. Here's an Irish American brother, you know, one of the wealthiest families in American history, the Kennedy family. He wasn't always someone who was supportive of civil rights while his brother John Kennedy was the president of the United States. But when his brother was killed in November of 1963, which was one of those moments in history, like COVID, like 9/11, like Katrina. You know, it traumatized the whole nation. Bobby became a different person. And Bobby, over the last 4 years of his life, Jack and everyone, became a leader. He accepted it. And his voice is dynamic. And so on April 4th, 1968, Bobby happened to be in Indianapolis, Indiana, about to give a speech. This white brother, who was a bridge builder, he was able to bring white and black and all these different types of people, Asian and Latin American, Latinx folks together. And he had to speak to a majority black audience, and he got word just as he was about to go out there that Dr. King had been killed. Watch the speech, y'all. It's about 5.5, 6 minutes on YouTube. It's one of the most incredible speeches in American history. Bobby Kennedy, because he accepted what Jack just said, you know, I'm a leader, you know, and he said the same things I'm saying. We got to have love. We have the compassion for each other. You know, we got to make an effort to change this world. Yeah. And it's not easy being a leader, Jack. It's lonely at times. It's hard. It's frustrating. A lot of times you'll be misunderstood. You definitely will be attacked. You know, you have to have character. You know, you have to be the same person privately and publicly, because if you're not privately who you are publicly, it will come out. You know, you have to have a moral compass. And if you really are a leader, all of you, Jack and everyone, Jessica and everyone who's spoken, leaders change the direction of conversations. They create new vocabulary. That's number one. Leaders create new vocabulary, change the direction of conversation. Leaders either join or create institutions, organizations, businesses, something that helps the people, helps people. It's not for you. This work is not for you. This is for the people. A leader, a leader creates other leaders. That's why I asked Jack that question. Leaders create other leaders.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. That was actually really amazing to hear. We work really closely with Jack, so you are a leader. All of you are leaders, right? So I do have 3 questions, so I think that'll probably bring us right to the end. So next is Pathia. Pathia, you had a question?
I didn't have a question, but
Okay.
I just wanted to go back to the last time you came to spoke to us. I was one of in the front row, and I was one of the first people who came up to you afterwards and told you about how riveting your book was, and I couldn't put it down. And it was different for that to be like an autobiography for me, because I never really read books like that. Mm-hmm. And throughout my college career, I've realized that classes and everything, whenever I feel like I've been like struggling to the point where I wanted to give up, I walk past that book and then I remember everything that you went through and realize that what I'm dealing with is basically nothing. And you really do help motivate people in that way.
You're going to turn me into a crying mess here, y'all. You know, this is really touching my heart because so much has happened in these last 4 years, my gosh. And, you know, I know that I had come to Iona for a couple of first-year orientations. And I know, you know, I want to shout out Dr. Michael Jordan, right? Dr. Jordan, his daughter used to be one of my interns and worked with me, Liv, and but I just, you know, and how do I say your name? Is it Pathia or Pathia?
Pathia.
Pathia Bruno. Thank you so much for your powerful words. Well, we need inspiration. I mean, you know, you see behind me, there's Muhammad Ali on one side, there's Bruce Lee on the other side. Like, we have to sometimes know that we're not out here by ourselves. You know, one of my favorite philosophers when I was in college, I discovered John Donne, Meditation 27. He said, no man is an island, but we're going to update it. No human is an island. You know, that's where the quote "For whom the bell tolls" comes from, which Hemingway used for the title of the book that I read when I was 11, "For whom the bell tolls," which made me say, I want to be a writer like Hemingway. You know what I'm saying? But none of us are islands. You know, I'm an only child, Pathia, Jessica, Jack, everyone. I'm an only child. I'm also a writer, which is a very solitary profession. But we do need communities of people. So one of the things I want y'all to think about too, you have your Iona community. You might have your student organization. I belong to a fraternity. I'm a hip hop head for life. If you look over my shoulder, it's kind of dark now. There's 5 skateboards. I've been a skateboarder since I was a kid. I'm a vegan. I'm a yogi. You know what I'm saying? I do a writer's workshop every Tuesday. Everyone's invited to it. I'll put the information in the chat. We need communities of people, that's important because it's a very difficult life, even with a career and all the things we have going on. If you decide that you want to help people, you need to be around people who also share your values around that they're committed to it too. Like if you're, about supporting the homeless or, fighting against poverty, or you're anti-racist or anti-sexist or anti-homophobia, transphobia, if you don't support anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, you need people who will feel the same way, who are like, I'm a vegan, so that I now have a certain regard for the environment, about animal rights, and I need to be around communities of people so I don't feel like I'm alone. So you're right, Thea, you read stuff, watch stuff, you listen to stuff, and sometimes you go back to stuff that you read or watched or listened to a couple years back. And I actually recommend that. As I was listening to Jack and you talk, I'm like, y'all have transformed. And so, yeah, like I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, for example, every few years. There's certain things around Bobby Kennedy or Dr. King or Ella Baker or Fannie Hamer that I go back to because I'm like, where I was 3 or 4 years ago, I need to revisit this work. I need to revisit this, and how will I process it now? Does that make sense, y'all? I just think it's important. Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Thea.
All right, our next question, I think, is really, I think, a really great question. So how can white people support the Black community without falling into the white savior complex? How do we do that?
Great question, and thank you all for posting Bobby Kennedy's speech in the chat. Well, I'm going to say this to my white family, because I do believe that we're family. I want us to become human beings and stop saying, well, I'm just a white guy, I'm just a white woman, or, because we know that race is a construct. It was constructed. It was constructed to support systems of oppression. I want you all to think about being human beings. What can you do? Read, study, travel, learn this history. Ask yourself a simple question. What was I before I became white? There's a rich heritage of being Jewish, of Italian, Irish, Polish, German, Russian. We can go down a list of things. Who were you? One of the best things I ever did when I, in my travel life, Brother Jason and other folks who do travel out there, is when I went to the UK, but I didn't just stop at London. I said, well, let me go over to Wales. You know what I'm saying? In fact, what I did on one trip, I flew into Dublin, Ireland first, which is not a part of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is, but I said, I need to see Ireland. I grew up in Jersey with a lot of Irish folks, but I don't know anything about Ireland. And you begin to realize there's a whole history that also has been suppressed and ignored in favor of the English, as if I'm like, wait a minute, you tell me that all these Irish writers I was told were English were actually Irish? You tell me these Welsh folks were actually Welsh, not British, English? And that's not to diss the English, but it's saying, hey, what do we need to do as white folks? Learn your heritage. You need to learn your heritage just like everyone else, just like Black folks, Latinx folks, Native American folks, Asian folks. Learn your heritage. Who are you? Stop calling yourselves mutts. I've heard so many white folks refer to themselves, well, I'm just a mutt. I'm part Irish, I'm part Italian. That's actually as bad as Black folks calling themselves quote unquote mutts or mulattoes, which is a term that's been traveled in our communities for years. Well, if you have all those different things going on, German, Italian, Irish, whatever it may be, learn about those things. Learn about that heritage. That's so important, because I think that it also humanizes us. And think back to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. He said near the climax of that speech, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will hold hands and sing in the words of the Negro spiritual. Think about that for a second. Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will hold hands and sing in the words of the Negro spiritual. What he was saying is, bring who you are to the table. Be proud of who you are and come to the table with that. And share that at that table. But if you just say, I'm just white, I'm just Black, I don't speak Spanish, I don't speak Chinese, I don't speak Mandarin. Well, learn. You know what I'm saying? I'm an African American, speak Spanish. Learn. We should learn languages. And then how do you be a good ally? Learn how to listen. It's the same thing that women said to me around sexism. Kevin Powell, you learn how to listen to women. Listen. If y'all have been paying attention, this is powerful documentary. Is it on HBO Max, y'all, about Mia Farrow and Woody Allen? Is it HBO Max right now? Anyone?
Yes. Yeah, that just started.
I mean, Woody Allen, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, R. Kelly, men and boys, white folks, no matter what group has privilege in a society, there's nothing wrong with having a sense of privilege. There's something wrong with having a sense of privilege that's not tied to a sense of equality and humanity for people who are different than you. That's the problem. When you use that privilege to hurt people, when you use that privilege to silence people, when you use that privilege to ignore people, when you use that privilege to say to people, it ain't that bad, or I never knew it was that way. And you don't see anything until something like Me Too or Black Lives Matter comes along. That's the problem. And so we need people to be consistent. We need white folks to be consistent. We need all folks to be consistent around challenging injustice. That's what folks can do, you know, and be good allies and have the ability to not always feel like you have to be in the lead of everything. Like my job as I was on a Clubhouse app. Y'all know that Clubhouse is like the latest, hottest new social media platform, right? And I was on a platform a week ago. It was a conversation about Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison, who I forgot shared the same birthdays. I was the only male on the stage. I said a few things, but most of it, I just sat silently and just listened because I'm like, I have to continue to listen to the voices of those who identify as women, period. So I can learn how to be a good ally, period. So I can know what I can do outside of this space to support the work of women. White folks, the same thing.
All right, next we have Will.
Hi, this is a question. This is a comment that might go into a question. I'm so glad you brought up Latinx heritage and you learning about Latinx heritage, because I want to also learn more about Black culture and learn about Asian culture as well. Was it tough trying to learn other cultures that aren't your own?
That's a wonderful question. If, you know, for me, it started as a child. Any Generation X people out there? Any Gen X people out there? Just for Gen X? We were lucky, Will, to grow up in a time where we had, can someone mute, please? Can someone mute? Okay. We were lucky to grow up at a time where we had things like Sesame Street, Electric Company, Zoom. Remember those shows? Uh-oh. Okay. And so for me, you know, I'm also.
Sorry, I'm trying to find them for you, Kevin. Hold on. If y'all can mute, make sure you're muted. I think we're good. Sorry, Kevin, go for it.
Oh, it's totally cool. It happens. I also went to integrated schools. Like I'm the first generation of folks who went to integrated schools. And so I had friends who were, you know, all Italian American, Jewish American, Polish, Irish, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Filipino, you know, and I never, you know, children are taught racism, children are taught hate, you know, but I think organically children just come together. And I was always very curious about people who were different than me, you know, and I made it a point to connect with folks. And, you know, especially in the North Jersey, New York City corridor, Will, African Americans or Black folks and Puerto Rican folks were like this. Like to this day, it's not unusual to meet someone with a name like Jamal Rodriguez.
Right, because
Jackson.
I know this type of neighborhood. I know this type of neighborhood. I lived in that neighborhood for most of my childhood.
And I took it a step further. I was like, I need to learn Spanish. You know what I'm saying? I am fascinated by this language. I'm fascinated by the rhythms, the energy of this language that I'm hearing. And so that's how it started for me. I mean, most of my friends who spoke Spanish as a child were Puerto Rican. And then as the Dominican immigrants started to come in large numbers, you know, a lot of my friends ended up being Dominican as well. And so I just spent time in these communities. And it was something that just happened organically for me. Like you have to want to be. It's kind of like when how many of y'all have been on a vacation, tell the truth, even if it's inside our country, inside or outside the country, and you went to like a hotel or something and you kind of didn't travel outside the hotel or the resort. Well, I mean, the first time I went outside the country was to Paris, France in 1992. And boy, did I go like a typical person who had never been anywhere. I immediately was like, where's McDonald's at? That's what I was looking for. Like, where's McDonald's, son, where's the McDonald's at? And I'm like, Kev, you know, so I was like, you might want to try French food. And the first thing I thought was French fries. I mean, I was just very limited. Even me who grew up loving Spanish, because I just, there's parts of me that was still closed-minded, didn't understand, hey, when you go somewhere new, you should actually immerse yourself in that culture, that community. Does that make sense, Will? That's what we do. It's like when I meet people all the time who say, well, I've been in New York, Kevin, and I can say, really, you've been in New York City? They're like, yeah. I said, let me guess. You've been to Radio City Music Hall, Rockefeller Center. You've been to 9/11 Memorial. You might have been to the Statue of Liberty, and you've been to Times Square. They're like, how'd you know? I said, because most of you never come to the Brooklyn or the Bronx or Queens or Staten Island. So how can you say you've actually experienced New York City? You've experienced the tourist stuff. That's it. And so that's how, there's different ways we can do it. We can do it, Will, through food. For me, arroz con pollo, mandoro, learning Spanish foods, you know what I'm saying? We can do it through music. You heard me reference salsa, merengue. I listen to music from all over the world. It's like, I love, Irish folk music. It sounds like the blues to me. You know what I'm saying? I love, some of our greatest crooners ever, when we think about jazz music or Italian American, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, you start going down, Vic Damone. And then I learned there's a whole history of crooning in Italy. This is where this tradition was passed from. So you become curious, you have to be curious about these things. And then you start to see the connections that we have to each other, if that makes sense. That's important. And then I think anyone who, ¿qué país, Will? ¿Qué país? Su familia, ¿qué país?
My family, it comes from Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. I'm half and half.
But think about the music, salsa, merengue, it's the drums. That's James Brown. That's hip hop. There's no coincidence that Latinx people and Black folks created hip hop in New York City. The connection we have musically, you know what I'm saying? And when I talk about hip hop, I always say Latinx people and Black folks together created hip hop. Not just Black people, both did it. You know what I'm saying? And so that's how we do it. And forever be curious about culture. I have a question for y'all. What is culture to you? Anyone? What is culture to you? I see all these incredible last names.
Don't be shy, y'all. What's culture?
I see all these incredible last names out there. I know y'all have something to do with culture, food, some sort of tradition. I see some Irish names out there. We're about to have St. Patrick's Day in a couple of weeks. No, we know something about culture.
I guess. Oh.
Yeah.
Shout it out.
Hey, is it Sienna?
Yeah, well, somebody was talking before me, I think.
Oh.
I guess just celebrating where you come from and your nationality.
Yep. Sienna?
Hi. I think culture is a lot of different things. For me, my dad's Irish and my mom's Italian, so it's just kind of embracing it, not letting it die, still making the same food, speaking the language, even the religion that comes with it. So even though my dad's Irish, my mom's Italian, so it's very different. They're both Catholic, so even though I feel like religion comes hand in hand with it too, it's a lot of different things that come together.
That's
and
right.
It's up to us to embrace it and keep it moving forward rather than having it dissipate, because it's easier to have it dissipate.
Do you know, for example, when your ancestors on the Irish side and the Italian side came to America? Do you have an approximate idea?
Yeah. So my grandparents on my Italian side, one of my grandparents came here and then the other one was born here. So my great grandmother actually came through Ellis Island. And she spoke no English, and nobody in my family went to college. But on my Irish side, it's a little further back, probably I think around the late 1800s they came here because of the potato famine. I think that's whenever the potato famine was. I can't really remember. I think it was the mid to late 1800s.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's when they came here. So yeah, I still embrace all of that.
And you can imagine when I went to Ireland and hearing the stories from Irish people directly of ancestors who literally crawled on their bellies to escape the country and the famine that you just talked about. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. Someone's literally ringing my doorbell. Hold on one sec. I'm here, but who else wants to ask a question?
So I think Allison had an actual, she was in line for a question, if you're ready for another question, unless you were going to continue with culture. So.
No, I mean, I just wanted to add to Sienna's point that part of culture is being keepers of history. keepers of history. And, as Sina was talking and, she chuckled about it, but she said, they didn't go to college. Think my mother, 8th grade education, my grandmother could not read or write. You know what I mean? But there's no shame in that. Just because our families, if they were Jewish, they're Italian, they were Irish, Puerto Rican, Dominican, no matter what our backgrounds, they made it possible for us to be here. You know what I mean? So they were smart. They were geniuses in their own way. They made things happen in spite of what they had to deal with, And when you begin to look at the history, think about how Italian Americans and how Irish Americans were treated by people. You know what I mean? Think about the signs that they saw about where they could and could not go. And then think about how we treat folks who might be Puerto Rican or Dominican or African American. It's the same thing. And so this is why I said these racial constructs are very, very dangerous. Let's add another resource to this. Martin Scorsese's great film, Gangs of New York with Daniel Day-Lewis and Leonardo DiCaprio, how the native whites treated the so-called foreign whites. Think about it. Watch that film. Watch it closely. Gangs of New York is a very, very important film to study because of those kind of divisions that existed, and how people are constantly pitted against each other. Let's have, let's ask a question. I'm going to just do a quick mute, but let's ask a question. I'm not mute, stop the video, but I'm here.
Well, Allison, you can ask your question. He can still hear you. He's what he's saying.
Okay, great. First of all, I want to agree with, I'm reading the chat box, and Chloe said that culture is being able to share things with other groups of people. And I wanted to ask Kevin personally, since I bet he has plenty more stories and experiences throughout your life so far. I'm planning to, in March, go to LA, spend a weekend with my family out there, because about March 10th or March 11th is the anniversary that Latasha Harlan was killed in a liquor shop in South Central California, which goes into, I did so much research and speak to family friends about the LA riots.
Yeah.
And seeing how that isn't similar to the riots that was done during the summer about us against the cops or different political views. That goes into two communities fighting against each other. And I also want to bring in awareness to the violence that is currently happening and isn't being as spoken about towards the Asian community. It's not as if we can no longer point fingers to like, oh, ACAB, even though that's true, or like being scared of the white man. No, it's much more being cautious of our own toxic traits. So my two questions to you, Kevin, because I understand we're running out of time, is please tell me what you know about the things that happened in 1992 and 1991, South Central California, and also your thoughts on why not only our own toxic traits within each and every one of our families and communities still have resentment towards each other, even though we should be taught more of the moments and times where people of different races came together, like Malcolm X's best friend, Yuri Kochiyama, was a Asian American activist that was strong in the Black Panther Party. And you definitely know much more names than I do.
Well, thank you. Yes. To answer your question, yes. I went to college in the late 1980s, so I absolutely know about the Latasha Harlan situation because I was organizing as a student and youth activist back then in all kinds of spaces. And I actually went to Los Angeles for the first time in 1992. 1992 was also the year that I appeared on a little TV show I'm sure none of you have ever heard of called The Real World. I was on the very first season of it. And during the taping of our season, which was from February to May of that year, in April of that year, the LA Rebellion, as many of us call it, exploded in Los Angeles. So we literally were filming the show as this was happening. We were watching it on TV at our loft where we did that first season. I knew about the Rodney King situation. This is before social media, so many of us were not caught off guard by what happened to Rodney King, but the severity of it. If you've never seen the video, he was literally beaten over 80 times by police officers, struck 80 times. In fact, Senator Bill Bradley, who had been my senator when I was coming up in New Jersey, actually did a video where he counted the number of times that the police officers hit Rodney King, over 80 times. And we know the story of Latasha Harlan. I happen to be working on a book right now. My 15th book is going to be a biography of Tupac Shakur. Latasha Harlan is in the book because Latasha Harlan is one of the people that Tupac Shakur talked about in his short life and how that affected him. Yeah, yes, exactly.
There's a short film on Netflix. I love it.
Yeah, and so yes, absolutely. And after we finished shooting my season of The Real World, I actually ended up working with a white brother who was our director. This is why racial coalition is important. He was one of our directors on the show. Rest in peace. His name was Rob Fox. He died a couple years ago. Still a very young man. And he asked me, if I'd be willing to work with him on a documentary about young people in LA after the whole rebellion happened. And so we actually went to LA for the first time in the fall of 1992. And we spent several months there filming a documentary called Straight from the Hood, which I'm sure you can find somewhere out there, but it deals with everything. And there is Latasha Harlan, Rodney King, what happened, but also efforts that were being made to bring people together. So yeah, I have a lot of experiences with Los Angeles. I know LA very, very well, and I've been out there many times since then. It's a profound place. It has the kind of diversity that New York City has, and New York metropolitan area has, but there's also a lot of separation still, a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of,
for sure.
Yeah. And in terms of what we can do, I just think we got to model what we want to see. I don't want to engage in the binary, and say everyone's my brother and sister. So what I will say is everyone here is my family. Everyone here is my family. Everyone's here is my family. If you go to my Facebook page, you're going to see people of all different backgrounds, all different kinds of people there. I'm not going to absolutely, this is a Black History Month program. I am absolutely proud. I'm going to say it 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. I'm proud to be an African-American. I'm proud to be an African person, a Black person, however I feel like saying it, that's what I am. But I'm also proud to be a part of the human race, the human family. Again, it's not an either or. And I think that we have to literally be what we want to see. And so for me, when I first started doing the work, it was only about race. But at some point, as I said earlier, I was challenged about sexism and like the intersectionality of gender issues. And then it became about gender identity. And like Kev, we cannot support homophobia. We can't support transphobia. Hey, we got to think about class issues. We got to think about ableism. I just did a panel the other day with a group of folks who talked about ableism, and hatred for disabled people in the hip hop community and the larger American society. Y'all know what I'm talking about, physical disabilities that we can see if someone can't hear, they can't see, or they are in a wheelchair or walking on crutches, and folks who have had some sort of disability that you can't physically see, but we often discriminate against people who are disabled. And so for me, it's also about just practicing what I say is that I want to see all people treated fairly, equally. I don't believe in the word tolerance. I don't want to tolerate people. I actually want to love people. I want to honor people. I want to respect people. That's what I like to do. But that love, respect, and honoring people does not happen if I don't know who I am and if I don't have the courage, as Dr. Bell Hooks has said many times, one of our great scholars, to cross cultural boundaries. And so it's work, and people have got to be willing to do the work, because the natural thing is to just stay in your little box and not go anywhere. I love New York City. I love New York City, but I'm here to admit to you, there are even people here in New York. We don't even go across boroughs. We don't go to Jersey. We don't go to Connecticut. We don't go to Massachusetts. Y'all know what I'm talking about. New Yorkers know what I'm talking about. When I first moved from Jersey to New York, what New Yorkers said to me? What exit are you from, and why does your state stink? And did you need a passport to get here? And I was all, offended by it, but I realized over time, New Yorkers, as sophisticated as we are, many of us are just like a lot of folks in our country. We never travel. We never go outside and learn things. We'll tell people, stop speaking Spanish, stop speaking Mandarin, stop speaking this. You want to know why a lot of Italian American folks lost Italian? Because it's somewhere along the line, someone said, don't speak Italian. You know why a lot of Spanish speaking folks lost Spanish? Someone said, don't speak Spanish. As if there was some shame in speaking Spanish or Italian or German or Polish. Speaking your native tongue. No, actually what we do when we hold on to our heritages is we make everyone better. We make everyone better, in my opinion. So I think it's work. We got a lot of work to do, but I believe in us. I have hope. If I can leave it here, Dr. Aponte, I have hope. There's days when I'm down, my head is down, but like today's days like this, what I just experienced with y'all at Iona College, Jessica, Pathia, Jack, Sienna, whew, y'all give me hope. Y'all give me a lot of hope for our country and for our planet. And that's what I get up for every day. And I want us to all have that. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard. It hurts my heart that we have now lost 500,000 Americans to COVID. It hurts my heart. And when we know that a lot of that could have been prevented, you know what I'm saying? So, but I got hope. You're looking at someone who was told that he didn't have a chance because of my background growing up. No father, single mother, welfare, food stamps, government cheese. I'm on my 15th book. You better believe I have hope. But I also realize it's not just about me and some career. It means nothing if you don't share with other people and help other people. Y'all with me?
Yeah.
So I love y'all.
Yes.
I love y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. This was so inspiring. Thank you for your time. Thank you everyone for your time, students for your questions and comments, and for sharing this hour with us. Have a beautiful day. Be well, be safe.